Welcome back and thanks for staying with us here on the Monday Report. In studio on my far right is Senator Moses Kajwang representing Homa Bay County. Evening to you, Senator.
Good evening.
And thanks for making time. Sheila Masinde is the Executive Director, Transparency International Kenya. And thanks for making time, Sheila. Abdikadir Mohamed, Senior Counsel, is a constitutional lawyer, formerly advised President Uhuru Kenyatta on constitutional issues. And many thanks for making time as well, Senior Counsel.
Asante.
Senator, coming to you first. In light of the statements made by the President, you are quick to absolve the lawmakers of the bicameral parliament. Why?
Thank you. The President shouted at Parliament, and Parliament shouted back. And I think that we are in a state of lucidity right now, where we realize that we do not need to fight each other if you're going to be successful in the fight against corruption. And I can tell you that last week, at the rise of the House, the Speaker of the Senate made very clear communication on the proper manner in which unethical conduct on the part of Parliament should be processed. Now, we had pointed out that if the President had adverse information on unethical conduct on the part of members of Parliament, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges has already provided procedures and steps for dealing with that. And at that point, we felt that that was important, and we still think that that is important. But what is more important is not to have a contest on who is right between the executive and the legislature. We must all accept that corruption is a serious disease in this country. It is in the legislature, it is in the executive, it is in the judiciary. At the end of the day, Parliament represents the people of Kenya. It is a very small sample of just about 300 ladies and gentlemen representing 55 million people. That 55 million people has got a lot of good people, but there are a few wash, there are a few conmen, there are a few corrupt people. And so you'd expect that if you've got a sample of 300, it would be representative of the population. So it would be foolhardy to deny that there could be wash characters and corrupt characters in Parliament. I mean, it's a representation of the country. But what we objected to was generalization and condemning an entire institution. Because in the 13 years I've been in Parliament, there's never been a motion that has been moved that we therefore move that this house be corrupt. It is not institutional, it is personal, and that's how it should be dealt with. But we are with the President on the same page, that this matter needs to be dealt with, but it needs to be dealt with in a systematic manner and in a manner that respects institutions. And in my view, when we go back to Parliament, we must make sure that the agencies that we have established, the laws that we have passed, just the other day we passed the conflict of interest bill, which has got very serious implications. Bodies like EACC, can we give them budget to make them effective in implementing the Conflict of Interest Act? Bodies like the OAG, bodies like the Control of Budget, let us give them the capacity so that this fight is institutional and it is devoid of political witch hunt and political machinations.
The President talked about some figure, and this is in relation to also what the Isiolo County Senator had decried at the floor of the Senate, and the tag names that were thrown around the chamber. And the money involved was 150 million Kenya shillings in the impeachment of Governor Abdi Guyo. To the best of your knowledge, did money exchange hands?
It did not. To my knowledge, it did not. And I think that is such a grave accusation that if the President has raw intelligence on it, really he should do what he promised he was going to do at the parliamentary group meeting. It is extremely gross because, look, just 2 weeks before then, we were processing the division of revenue, the county allocation of revenue, and we also processed a new formula for division of resources amongst county governments. Isiolo County, we were able to ring fence almost 400 million additional. There were some counties that were getting a very low allocation, Isiolo being one of them, Tharaka Nithi being another one, Lamu, Nyamira, Nyandarua, Kirinyaga, Taita Taveta. There were about 11 counties. It would be grossly out of order if the Senate or Parliament appropriates additional resources to go to Isiolo for purchase of drugs, for completion of the county headquarters, for completion of the county assembly headquarters, for that money to be siphoned and used for purposes that are outrightly criminal. That, if that can be established, then I would be happy if you can make an example out of it.
Sheila, you thereafter called for the naming of the MPs the president talked about. How far have you attained that in relation to the names that you wanted published?
What we asked is that, you know, what the president was doing was just shouting himself hoarse in public rallies, in public engagements. And as Senator has said, the president shouted, they shouted back. It doesn't help the situation. It won't help resolve the issue, because this is a very grave issue. We're talking about corruption. And as the Senator says, if you're, for instance, look at the case of Isiolo, it means that if people were bribed, for instance, in that, to vote in a certain way in that impeachment motion, it means that funds, critical funds to health, to and other critical county functions could then have been misappropriated. So these are grave allegations. But you see, this is not the first time that these allegations have been made. This is now the president making those allegations. There have been times when other members of parliament have made similar allegations, but not just touching on other people, but even executive itself has been accused of bribing members of parliament to pass legislation in the interest of the executive, in the interest of the president. You had some of the statements that were made on the floor of the House last week, where even there were some insinuations that blows like that touching on the social health insurance, the housing fund, the finance, that people were saying that they did their part of the obligation and did what the president wanted. So why are they now being accused of one thing or the other? Now, what we asked is these matters cannot be taken lightly. If the president has intelligence, if he has evidence, there are institutions which have been formed and are entrenched in the Constitution, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, responsible for investigation. Why can't that evidence be given to EACC to then investigate, probe these claims, so that if then someone is found culpable, not just the receiver, but also the giver of the bribe, let the law take its course. Because time without number, we've seen allegations on bribery, impropriety, gross misconduct, allegations of, you know, touching on members of parliament. And this is a critical office. These are people that we elect to represent Kenyans, to be responsible for oversighting billions and billions of public resources, legislating. But now there are accusations that even those legislations that have been passed in Parliament or in Senate could have been influenced by bribes. So it is in the interest of everyone, and I think Kenyans have a right to get the truth to these issues. Because if we continue shouting about it, for me, it just looks like an attempt to play at the public gallery.
Senior Counsel, did Parliament set itself up for this?
There was a famous parliamentarian called Shikuku. One time he said KANU was the only party, it was a single party. And he said KANU was dead. And saying KANU was dead was completely acceptable during Kenyatta's time. And he was asked to substantiate. And he said, you don't need to substantiate the obvious. That corruption is rife in Parliament is so obvious, nobody needs to substantiate. That corruption is so clear in the institution of Parliament, as an institution, is absolutely, anybody who knows anything that goes on in Parliament knows that so well. In the courts, when something is so notorious, you say you don't need to prove it. You take judicial notice of it. It's time we took judicial notice of corruption in Parliament. The president was absolutely right, and he was talking to parliamentarians. He was not talking to the media. He was not talking to some forum. He was talking to members of Parliament. Now, if you ask me, he shouldn't have done that. He should have done something about it. Talking about, I agree with the good lady. He should have done something about it. Number one. Number two, one of the biggest causes of corruption in Parliament is the executive. Because the biggest threat to Parliament's oversight role is the executive. So the president is the cause. Actually, he is a corrupter of Parliament, the president. And Parliament is Parliament is dead. Parliament does zero oversight. And literally, a lot of corruption happens in Parliament. Anybody who knows what goes on in Parliament will tell you it goes on in committees, in functions. Any governor who has been impeached or has been brought for impeachment, corruption was there. Anytime a committee of Parliament is doing budget stuff, there's a lot of malfeasance. So I think instead of debating whether there is corruption in Parliament or not, one of the few silver linings on this matter is that Parliament and the President are on loggerheads. I hope they really go to war, because that is the best thing that can happen for the country. That those two institutions then will check each other, because our constitution is based on checks and balances. Mm-hmm. These institutions are supposed to check each other. They're not supposed to be in bed. It started during Uhuru Kenyatta's time, when the former Speaker of Parliament, Muturi, thought he was an officer of President Kibaki's State House. It has continued to this Parliament. So there is corruption in Parliament. The President was completely wrong. I don't think the President is that interested in fighting corruption in Parliament. If he was, he needs to take the appropriate actions, not give a press conference, but actually do something about corruption in Parliament. And it will help the country if those institutions go to war.
Yeah, good for democracy, you say. Senator Kajwang, then how do you somewhat remedy the elastic principles of Kenya's political elite, including members of the bicameral parliament, where you belong, in causing up, cultivating such a culture of causing up to the executive and whoever occupies the State House?
Well, I think, as I said, we must strengthen institutions. Parliament is an institution. Of course, if you are to look for the positives out of the conversation over the last 2 weeks, number one is that members of Parliament, both Senate and National Assembly, have now realized that they are dispensable, that they are not that very special in the eyes of the executive. They can be used and dumped. You saw members of the National Assembly very strongly defending our finance bill. The then chair of the Budget Committee, Ndindi Nyoro, made very strong statements why it was necessary to tax Kenyans more. And several other leaders in the National Assembly and members of the National Assembly stood up for that finance bill. The President called them to State House and said he was not going to assent to it, and they clapped. At that point, it should have dawned on my colleagues in the National Assembly and even in the Senate that we can be thrown under the bus. Now, the events of the last 2 weeks should now embolden Parliament to ensure that we do the right thing, so that at the end of the day, the judge will be Kenyans rather than the executive. Yeah. The other thing that has made Parliament quite lazy is the availability of funds that members of Parliament, particularly the National Assembly, can use to substitute their core constitutional mandate. I know some members of National Assembly who are very good managers of CDF, very good. You walk around their constituencies, schools are done, they are tiled, they are roofed, toilets are built, painted properly. But when they come to Nairobi, you wouldn't know that this is a member of National Assembly or member of Parliament. And for a long time, over the 20 years of CDF, it has enabled a situation where sometimes the people vote for a member of Parliament because he's the one who knows how to gawa money properly, rather than he's the one who can oversight. So the conversations of the last week, the candid conversations around CDF, the candid conversations around corruption, must jolt us back to the realization that at the end of the day, the principle is the people. Okay. The principle is not the executive. Yeah. And I think it is good. It definitely, because for proper functioning of a democracy, it's not just about institutions fighting. There must be complementarity. There will still be areas where we'll still be able to sit on the table and agree. And particularly this matter, the fight against corruption, it is not a problem that can be solved by finger pointing. Because if, as Abdikadir says, there's a problem in Parliament, and by the way, Parliament operates on traditions and precedents. Okay. He was in Parliament much earlier than I did. Yeah. So perhaps if that tradition is there, they're the ones who established it. Yeah. So, but it is not useful to do the blame game. Mm-hmm. We must confront it. Okay. And you know, the Conflict of Interest Act, which was passed just recently, has got very detailed mechanisms on dealing with so many of these things that we are talking about. Does the president have the guts to ensure that budgets, to ensure that independence is afforded to the agencies that are supposed to implement it.
Okay.
That is what we're waiting to see.
And Senator, then, talking about the public apprehension, in finding the Damascus moment, Parliament was ought to have been prompted by the mood of the public, is it? The angst and the anguish, not the statements from the president. Ideally, even if we were to place the consequences, then the executive should be on the receiving end because they can impeach the sitting president. How have they eroded that capacity given to them to the extent that they have incapacitated themselves?
Look, the Gen Z revolt looked like an attack on parliament. It was an attack on government, being the legislature, judiciary, and the executive. It's just that they didn't make their way to the seat of the executive. But it was general anger against all the arms of government. At that point, I think the mistake we made was to then recoil as government, the various arms of government, and try to be defensive and try to cook up some instant solutions. But that did not get to the core of the problems that the young people were raising. And I think that the conversations, and I would like even civil society to continue raising the ante on these particular issues. If we don't deal with corruption, it is going to be a systemic, it is already is a systemic problem. It is already is a cancer. But we seem to be paying lip service because on one side of the mouth, we'll be condemning the vice. On the other side of the mouth, every Friday, we are taking 5 helicopters to go to Northeastern to provide cash handouts to people. From what proceeds? What business legitimate can you do that can fuel 5 helicopters to go for an empowerment drive where cash is being disbursed? This Damascus moment, if we didn't learn anything from the Gen Z revolt, and if we don't take advantage of this particular Damascus moment on the part of the president, I can tell you in the next 1 year, the young people are going to run us out of town.
Sheila, what's the perception index according to Transparency International Kenya of the Houses of Parliament?
Well, there has been no specific study on Parliament by us as TI, but generally, when you look at the general perception of corruption in the country, it is very low. In the last perception index globally, Kenya had a score of 32. But what that tells you is that when it comes to the institutions, the legislations, because we have a plethora of legislations and institutions that are supposed to be dealing with the problem of corruption, including Parliament. Because one thing that this Constitution gave us is independent institutions, the doctrine on separation of power, and also checks and balances. For me, those are the 3 key elements of the Constitution, which we'll be celebrating in 2 days as we mark Katiba at 15, but which I think since 2013, we have totally torn up that Constitution and thrown it into the dustbin. When you look at how the executive, particularly the political class, has encroached on the mandates, for instance, and the functional autonomy of independent institutions that are supposed to check some of these things, including corruption. So that fuels that high perception of corruption in the country. And then there's also recently we did a Kenya Bribery Index and we released the results just last month, where 72% of Kenyans said that corruption had increased in the last 1 year. And then when you ask them, how do you see the war against corruption proceeding in the next 1 year? And 80% are pessimistic. I saw the EACC report. I think the results are more or less similar in terms of the perceptions. And these perceptions are based actually on experiences. You experience a bribery demand or you experience, witness corruption, and that tells you that every fabric of this country is affected by corruption. So maybe just to respond a bit to what Senator Kajwang says about the 3 institutions, the 3 arms of government rather, judiciary, executive, and parliament, I would actually hold parliament even to a higher standard, because it is parliamentarians that we elect. Yes, of course, for the executive, we elect the president and the deputy presidents, a joint ticket. But then it's the parliamentarians we elect to check and hold the president and the executive accountable.
Have they done so in the past 2.5 years? Have
they? Look at what we have even in terms of the outcomes of the Auditor General's reports. The recommendations that the Auditor General's reports. We depend on Parliament to actually look at some of these, the reports. We see them summoning, and I'm happy Senator is here. I don't know that he still chairs the peak pack of
still chairs, yeah.
But I'll just use the example of the National Assembly.
Yeah.
You see them being summoned, you see people being summoned, but then where's the follow-up? We've seen commissions of inquiry by Parliament on some of these corruption cases, some going back even 5 years. Remember the time of the COVID-19 millionaires, KEMSA. Where is the follow-up? Parliament has let us down in terms of accountability. But as I said, we hold Parliament to a higher standard, because even when it comes to vetting and appointment and vetting processes, it is Parliament that we charge that responsibility to ensure that the right people are in office. Do they vet these people properly? People give declarations of wealth, and then we just nod on and note. But we don't even ask and ascertain some of those declarations that are given. Thank God now we have the conflict of interest law, and we hope some of these things will be taken a bit more seriously regarding the declaration of interest. But you see, Parliament, for me, holds a greater level of accountability. When you look at the three arms of government, and it hasn't done that.
Senior Counsel, this crusade ought to have been driven by the EACC, the ODPP, is it? Why the President?
So can I first of all visit the Parliament? In terms of quantum, the amount of monies that exchanges hands in Parliament is very little, because they're just few and the amounts are small. The biggest problem, the biggest disservice is the work Parliament would have done that goes undone. The most important institution of governance is Parliament. It's not the ODPP, it's not EACC, it is Parliament. Parliament is institution number one under the Constitution. So you lose out as a country on all the things Parliament will have done. One project done by the executive is billions of shillings, and it's stolen. And the people who are to have checked that is Parliament, and they're missing the action. So that's really where my beef with Parliament is, because I was a former parliamentarian and I know what Parliament can do. In terms of the ODPP and the ACC, quite a number of our institutions have been emasculated by the executive. Quite a number of our institutions don't operate as they ought to, because the premier institution of governance is missing in action. Most of these institutions get power or support or cover from Parliament. So in 10th Parliament, we had the precursor to the ESC, the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission. The board report to us in committee to say, look, the presidency or the executive has reappointed a director general without our involvement. It's Parliament that came in to support them, to push the executive to make sure that that does not happen. So if Parliament is not doing what was expected, or not doing as well as was expected, these are the institutions that are far much weaker. Having said that, that does not absolve the ESC or the ODPP, because all these institutions are clothed with powers, they are clothed with cover to do their work, and they have obviously not done. My bigger problem is really the governance infrastructure that we have, the structure that we have really depends on Parliament doing its role and checking the executive. If Parliament is missing, or if the executive emasculates Parliament, the entire structure doesn't work.
Yeah, and whilst that is the reality, then can it then Parliament find a reawakening moments and stand up to the executive?
I am hoping that two critical things were pushed last week, which both are very dear to Parliament, and I hope that gives them a jolt. The first is that the President and to a lesser extent the former Prime Minister actually attacked parliamentarians and the institution of Parliament. And just like every other human being, Parliament doesn't like getting attacked. Certainly not by the people they thought they were supporting or doing their bidding. So I hope that jolts. The other is the fight over CDF. And can I just say, there is a misconception about CDF. If I was to bank the constitutional argument aside, the most useful shilling spent by the Kenya government is CDF. The most useful shilling. If you are to audit the most useful, I know it's politically incorrect to say so, but believe you me, the amount that is spent on CDF is the most useful money spent by the Kenya government. It is not as much as people assume, because parliamentarians are not very popular. CDF is unpopular. The constitutionality is a completely different issue, and I can have that discussion. But knowing CDF, knowing what happens, that's a very useful. So because there has been attack on CDF and there has been an attack on their name, their good name, Parliament, I hope, fights back. I hope then this is the, as you said, the Damascus moment, where they wake up and finally hold their executive accountable.
Yeah, Senator Kajwang, how has Parliament and an architecture that is so different from our old constitutional dispensation so easily supplicated at the feet of the executive, eroding its immense institutional power?
I will take a less academic approach. The Constitution defines Kenya as a multi-party democracy, and the system of governance is a presidential system. In the US, partisanship is the order of the day, not by partisanship, partisanship. When the Republicans are running the country through their president, there is serious partisanship. People only come together when there's a gridlock that is shutting down the economy. In the UK, which Westminster style and parliamentary system, where we have moved away from, you remember the debate around Brexit. Yeah. It was a political party position. You know, the people were herded as a group, and you are either supporting Brexit or you are not supporting the party that you are subscribing to. So a multi-party democracy has got certain dynamics, which then would render academic some of the arguments that we're offering here. Because you've got formations in that parliament, some that belong to the party of the president. This thing was not, it was not invented in Kenya. The people we borrowed it from, the Americans, be it the Indians, be it the South Africans, be it the British, partisanship is the order of the day. Now, has Parliament been absolutely useless? Definitely not. One of the tools of oversight is impeachment and removal from office of public and state officers who are not doing things that are aligned to the Constitution.
Including?
The Deputy President, including governors. The Senate has exercised that power. And in the communication from the Speaker, I think since the Senate was established, we've had almost 18 impeachment motions. Half of them, the governors have been sent home. Half, also, the charges have been found to be unsubstantiated. So it is not true that Parliament has been asleep. Parliament can send a member of the presidency home. It is also not true that when it comes to financial oversight and accountability, Parliament has been asleep. This financial year, and let me speak from my perspective as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate. On the 27th of March, 2025, we called a special sitting of the Senate. I presented a report to the Senate on the reports of the Auditor General for the financial year 2023-2024, the most recent financial statements, for the very first time. I presented a 400-page fiduciary risks report. I presented a 2,000-page county-by-county analysis of issues raised by the Auditor General. Now, we made recommendations. There were recommendations for the EACC to investigate. There were recommendations on administrative action. Now, we can say Parliament has all the power, but my friend, Senior Counsel, knows that Parliament does not investigate. Parliament can do an inquiry, but it can only make recommendations to the investigative agencies to do further investigation. Parliament does not prosecute. That file has to be passed on to the ODPP. Okay. Parliament does not convict or acquit. That is the judiciary. Parliament does not correct. So it cannot then be blame isolation of Parliament without looking at the entire ecosystem. And that's why I said that when we sat back as members of the Senate, we said, no, let's not shout at each other, but let's find a systematic institutional approach to ensure that this conveyor is working. So like Sheila has asked, what has happened to the reports of the Auditor General? Okay. I can direct you to the website of the Senate. you'll find a 2,000-page county-by-county report, a 400-page fiduciary risk report, and there's clear action that has been indicated by Parliament on what should be done by institutions, and that has prompted us to invite the EACC before the Senate on the 10th of September to come and give us a county-by-county report on the action taken. Okay. And we also looked at the Act, or the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act. Parliament has the power to request for a report from the ODPP on any matter. It is not directing, but it is asking for information. And we have said, where the EACC says that they've done their investigations and handed over the file to ODPP and the trail has gone quiet, we are also going to call them so that they can give the nation some account. So we probably have not done 90%, probably not even 70%, maybe not even 60%. But it would not be proper to say that Parliament has been completely at bed with the executive.
Yes, Sheila.
Well, it's good that they're waking up now from what Senator is saying. If that is to happen on September 10th, because what we are speaking on...
the broad brush paving there.
No, the report came on 27th March.
Yeah, we're speaking from experience.
So it started earlier.
Yeah, because my own view was, yes, you can do the reports, but if the institutions are not going to take action, and they're not going to be, most importantly, held to account. So I'm happy that now they're going to call back someone EACC, someone ODPP, and find out, so we gave these recommendations in our follow-up reports based on what the Auditor General's findings and recommendations are. What have you done about this? I think that is very, very important, because that has been the missing part of the accountability chain when it comes to the issues around the public audit reports and the role of Parliament. So happy that's happening. We are going to watch closely to ensure that action is actually taken, because I think we have a problem in terms of action by some of these institutions. And I also want to just take the opportunity also to just maybe also respond to this issue around what are some of the things that Parliament has done. Yes, the impeachment motions, we've seen that. But of course, we also know that each impeachment motion has come with claims of bribery. They said that's what we started this discussion on. You know, when we looked at the deputy president's impeachment, some of the governor's impeachment, there are always claims of corruption in that process. And the claims that if you're not politically aligned to the State House or the president, then Parliament is likely to vote regarding how the powers that be want you to vote. So I think there are still those claims, and I think that is why then Kenyans have very little trust in some of these processes. So these processes, even where they support that this person has been accused of corruption and should go home, but then there's always that doubt, but wait a minute, were these people actually compromised? Allow me to also feedback on what a senior counsel has said about the efficacy and the relevance of CDF, and I'm happy he has said he doesn't want to get into the constitutional debate, because he's a constitutional lawyer. So he knows once he gets into that debate, he himself will be the first one to say that CDF is unconstitutional, because the work of MPs is oversight, representation, and legislation. Nothing to do with implementation, because CDF is about then a project implementation, things that should be done then by the executive, whether the national level or the county level. So how are you going to be given oversight money, but you're the one who has implemented? Where is the accountability? You know, what if you're accused of misappropriation? The same report on misappropriation of CDF is coming to you at the National Assembly. How fair are you going to be?
Okay.
You know, and actually, even there have been a number of cases that have gone all the way to court on the misappropriation of CDF, a number of them. So that is why we have problems in regard to CDF accountability without even getting into that whole constitutional debate.
Yes,
Thank you. So first of all, the constitutional issue, absolutely, I agree with you. The practical issue that I was looking at is there is very little accountability on any money Kenya government uses. So that's true for the entire budget. But in terms of how it is used, practically speaking, that is the most useful shilling that is spent. The constitutional issues, I absolutely agree. Now, in terms of, since we are focused on Parliament, Parliament is a very powerful institution. From the get-go, when the government comes in, the most senior officials, state officers, are sent to Parliament for vetting. In other words, Parliament can decide all those ministers the president has sent, all those PSS that were sent by the Public Service Commission and the president, we don't want them. They are not fit So they have that power to decide. So they are the gatekeepers of who serves at the highest level. They have absconded. They have not sent anybody packing. When we all know there are very many people who are unfit to hold those senior posts. That is number one. The second thing is they have the power of the purse. Parliament does the budget, not the treasury, not the president. The people who decide how money will be spent in the country is Parliament. It is the most powerful tool you can use. Parliament can decide this institution will not get a shilling.
Okay.
Parliament has said so before. So Parliament can decide through that power what to support and what to stop. And if the ODPP or ECC is not doing their work, you can summon them. They have the power to summon anybody at any time and ask any question. So they have not utilized that.
Yeah, and that happened, is it, in practice? No reforms, no budget for President Moi.
There you go.
And how then did parliamentarians...
You ask a very important question, and Senator, the 10th Parliament, the 9th Parliament were operating under the old constitution, under essentially a dictatorship under old President Moi. And they were fighting so hard for space. You know, there was a time members of Parliament were paid at OP. Your salaries, you would go to Harambee House to get paid. That is how much Parliament was under the executive. Even your salaries was paid by OP. And those members of Parliament, Olo Aringo and the others, were fighting so hard to give Parliament independence. That's why they created the Parliamentary Service Commission, so that your salaries and your emoluments are not controlled by the executive. And then you have the constitution that then gives you so much support and power. And then you hand that over to the executive and say, we are waiting for you to... If you asked me, if the president today said Parliament should dissolve, you probably would get a majority of the members of Parliament voting for such a motion. If you ask me where the rain started beating us, the ICC probably would be the point I'll say that is where we went crazy and we went wrong. The ICC was the death knell of Chapter 6. If you remember, we came in with, okay, if you look at the history, this country has had certain moments when we could really break with the past. There was we were at independence, you could really go the right way. The next point, if you ask me, was 2003, when President Kibaki was elected with such a... And we could turn the right turn, but there was a problem with the MOU. The next was when the new constitution was promulgated. And for that one, what made us lose the train, in my opinion, was the ICC. That the ICC went ahead and indicted 6 people, and we elected 2 of them. And the fact that they were indictees and we elected them, and they were elected, then took away the power of the... You could not come around and say the next politician has to be held to account. I mean, you have elected somebody who is indicted at the ICC. So that's where we went wrong, and we have gone wrong since. Parliament's capture didn't start under the current administration. It started in the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. The first administration first, and was cemented in the second administration. And it has been downhill since. If we get Parliament to turn around, then the Constitution and its implementation and our governance can only be better. If Parliament stays the way it is or goes worse, then I think everything else is up for grabs, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Senator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, nostalgia can be a powerful intoxicant because my friend remembers the good old days of Parliament. Mm. With the new constitution, we have very clear procedures, even for budgeting and financial management, under the PFM Act, under regulations, and budgeting starts with a budget policy statement, which comes to Parliament. And I will repeat this. The budget policy statement is an intent of the executive in place, an executive that was elected through a political party that has got members in that Parliament. And it comes from their manifesto. It comes from their agenda. So you cannot dissociate that joint at the hip between the executive and members of Parliament or members of National Assembly, because they belong to parties, and Kenya is a multi-party democracy.
So, Senator, at what point then And why do you think members of parliament overlook the national public priority at the expense of political party belonging?
Absolutely.
Because who do you elect to parliament? Is it a pastor or a politician? It is a politician. So it is a political process.
So politicians do what they deem fit, not what the public does.
And the politician belongs to a political party.
Yeah.
And that political party could be the party that the president belongs to. And there's absolutely nothing wrong to have a party position. Because as I've demonstrated in the US, they take party positions in the most annoying manner.
Yeah.
Even in the UK, they take party positions.
But Senator,
most annoying
two
manner.
quick examples, and most Democrats were against the Build Back Better initiative by President Biden, and also Tory members of the Conservative Party were against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit plans in removing the United Kingdom from the European Union. However, the political party belonging we talked about, at what point then does the political party position not outweigh the public position here? In this case, the collective argument that, for instance, in 2024, members of parliament clapped when the president said he's not going to sign the finance bill. A day before that, they knew the public mood was against the punitive tax proposals, yet they ended up passing it. So did they look at the president and the political party they belonged to at the expense of the public mood, which was, do not overtax us, look, the economy is bad, that we are stretching, the household budgets are under squeeze. So where's the balance between the public interest and political party?
I agree with you, Ayub. But then let's pose the question, even if you took a Socratic approach. Who do you elect? How do you decide who becomes your MP? There are some parts of this country where people campaign to be members of National Assembly or Senate, saying that they're going to assist the party leader in the fight in Nairobi. There are some parts of the country where people elect a member of National Assembly on the basis of how they're going to utilize the CDF. Until we reconfigure our selection criteria, because our election is not an integrity test, and it is not a merit test. It is a popularity political test. We are in parliament, there are 300 of us. There are people who have never spoken on the floor of the House. And yet when you go to their constituencies, they're extremely popular in funerals. They're extremely popular in sport activities. We must reconfigure our selection criteria. Because you will come here and say the ideal, the Platonic approach. But at the end of the day, Parliament is composed of men and women who have gone through that process. Now, let me weigh in on this issue of CDF, because I think by far, many members of National Assembly pitch their campaigns on proper utilization of the CDF. And I say so because I've got 8 constituencies that form my voting block. And I know the conversations. And I agree with Senior Counsel here that the issue of CDF is quite emotional. And it is not something that we can deal with from the Nairobi perspective. In fact, this bill is before the Senate. And when it comes for a first reading, and when we go into public participation, and when we go into our legislative work, I can tell you, Ayub, we, as members of the Senate, we have said we are not necessarily going to kill the baby. But we believe that we must restructure, we must rewrite the rules around CDF. And 2 things must happen. We must get politicians out of CDF. The second thing is that we must bring back equity rather than equality. I was in Diwa constituency just the other day. 300,000 residents. Lamu East, 25,000 residents. They get almost the same allocation on CDF. That equality cannot work. We believe that even with new structures of governance, including county governments, this money, this fund that has already been established, can still be implemented through conditional grants, or we can look at other structures, like the Equalization Fund is being administered up to village, up to location level, without going through the constituencies and without going through the county government. There are various approaches that we can use, but the public is a bit apprehensive. For example, schools are reopening, and I saw your news item. Schools, books have not been supplied in a number of schools. I was with the heads of headmasters in my county. They're telling me that in some cases, a school can be supplied with 3 or 4 textbooks for a huge population. Why? Because when Matiang'i was CS, he reorganized that system so that supplies could be coming from Nairobi. That has failed. There's something else they use for extracurricular activity, where initially it used to be collected at the local level, then it was sent back to the national. Nothing is coming back down. Okay. So the apprehension is, even if you say that take the money back to the Ministry for Infrastructure, there are certain parts of this country that won't work. So on CDF, I think we will perhaps agree to disagree with some of our political leaders, but we must restructure it to remove politicians so that politicians can come back to the higher calling that Senior Counsel is talking about.
You had a point?
Yeah, I was just going to, sorry. Look, there's a point I agree with Senator, that members of parliament are politicians and our political structure is a problem. That being said, there's no political party that has corrupt practices on its manifesto. What we're asking parliament to do is its mandate under the Constitution. And there's no political party that says, you as my member of parliament, I'm going to send you a very unqualified person. You have to accept. Under what mindset? You are not looking out for the national interest. You are not doing your constitutional mandate. What we're asking parliament to do is not to jump out of their political parties. They belong to a political party. But it is incumbent upon you to make sure that your political party does the right things, to look out for the national interest, to do your duty as a member of parliament. Because when you are a member of parliament, you are in the most important decision-making body of the country. You can't say because of a political party, I am going to be blind, I'm going to close my eyes when somebody completely unqualified is sent as a minister because of political party loyalty. Or if half the budget is being stolen, I'm going to keep quiet because my political party is in the presidency. Because it's possible for parliament to be one party, or one house of parliament to be in one party, and the presidency to be in another party. So government is not the executive. And that's why I say the rain started beating us when Muturi was the first speaker, when they assumed they were government and the government bills. In fact, the same fallacy that budget is from the executive. Budget is not from the executive. Budget is a parliamentary function. In the US, they say the president's proposals are dead on arrival. They are thrown into the dustbin. You negotiate with Parliament for the budget. Yeah. So I think it's important for Parliament to take its role. The fact that they are in the same party with the President or with the Executive does not absolve them from taking their responsibility.
Yeah. Yes, Sheila.
Yeah, just a point on the CDF and the role of Parliament. I think if CDF then was, as Senator says, I understand it from his explanation, is to deal with the inequitable allocation of resources in the country, then we must deal with the elephant in the room. Why are we still in this day and age talking about inequitable allocation of resources? You know, what constitutional structures we have already constitutional structures when you talk about the county governments, the devolved system of governance, and the funds, the many funds that exist that are supposed to ensure that, you know, every Kenyan is reached by by that shilling or cent, you know, from what we taxpayers pay to the government every month. Then how do we ensure that then there's equitable allocation such that then we don't use unconstitutional means like CDF to perpetuate a problem? Because as I said, there's still a very big problem in terms of accountability. And just look even at the story you had on education. Yeah. You know, the level of need, poverty and hunger in this country, I don't think it's going to be dealt with by ensuring that you strengthen CDF, you constitutionalize it, you legitimize it. You may try whatever you want. I don't think it's going to work in under this current constitutional framework. So we must deal with the elephant in the room. But also the level of hunger, need, and desperation is so much across the country. I don't think Kenyans are looking at that CDF and saying this is the answer to all our problems. I mean, just look at even how they're reacting to the empowerment, this whole empowerment rallies. You can see they're just looking for money from anywhere. So it's not just CDF. So we just need to ensure that we use the means that we have created, you know, under this constitution, that we took so much time to develop, that we fought so much with through our tears, sweat, and blood, you know, and let MPs do the work they're supposed to do. Because as it is now, this obsession with CDF is compromising the oversight role. MPs are not oversighting. Money is being stolen left, right, center. This country is up for grabs. MPs are doing very little about it. You know, when it comes to representation, they are not representing the public interest. The public says they want this, they don't want the finance bill, they don't want the housing levy, they don't want the social health insurance fund. MPs go and vote in a different way. So they are not representing Kenyans. When it comes to legislation, look at the quality of legislation, you know. So MPs are not doing the work that they're supposed to do because they are obsessed with CDF. So we must get it out of the way so that MPs can do the work that we have put them in office to do.
Yeah, and Senator, before the vote on the Finance Bill 2023, now an Act of Parliament, the President in Narok County, finger-pointed MP, said, I want to see who is the lawmaker who will vote against this. It seems this is not a shadowy conspiracy, it's openly planned in public. Yet you have MPs who will go to Parliament and be presidential cheerleaders and representatives of the public. Can that understanding be revived now?
The beauty of our constitutional order is that we have elections every 5 years. And the trend has been that at every election, 60% of members of Parliament go home. And so we've got renewal, we've got a way of refreshing. And so it is not just a matter of saying MPs are not doing their work. We must also make sure that we do our civic duty as citizens to ensure that we put the right people in office. Absolutely. You see, it is contradictory to be encouraged that we have a lot of power, but then when we propose that, fine, even this CDF, we can restructure it, then I'm being told that, no, you cannot do it. Look, Ayub, the thinking of the person on the ground, leave alone us in high streets in Nairobi, if you can ring fence 15% for devolution, ring fence another 2.5%, again, it's devolved. Actually, it's devolved. That was the argument of the courts, that money should go through devolved structures. So if we can ring fence 15%, ring fence another 2.5%, ring fence another 0.5% as equalization fund, you have a total of 18% that can go direct to the grassroots without being pilfered in Nairobi. What would be wrong with that? We have so many funds that have been established. Road Maintenance Levy Fund, Housing Fund. You can have CDF renamed Sub-County Development Fund, or it can be named Equitable Development Fund, whatever it is. It is just about ensuring that people can be assured that they will continue to get resources irrespective of the political choices they've made. In the past, and that past that we are glorifying, there are certain parts of this country that could not get even doctors posted to those areas. And whenever I talk to governors from northern Kenya around this issue of medical personnel, for example, saying that we centralize it so that it operates like TSC, I have been told by governors and people who are boots on the ground that if you take this thing back to Nairobi, then people will be posted from Nairobi, they will never report. You have seen teachers are not reporting to northern Kenya. They are claiming it is insecure and all that. And the governor told me, Senator, you must allow us to come up with proper incentives and proper packages that can ensure that these people can come and work in Mandera, can work in Garissa, can work in Wajir, and can work in Turkana. So Kenyans want to be assured of support. They want to be assured of development irrespective of their political choices. In fact, that was a conversation we are having this week. One of my colleagues said that places like Homa Bay didn't vote for the president and so they shouldn't get development. But that is a wrong perception. That is a wrong concept. Voting and contribution to the economy are two completely different things. Okay. You can contribute to the economy without supporting the president in office. Should you be denied development? And so that was the initial thinking around CDF, and of course it must be aligned to the Constitution. And you remember the other objection that the courts raised, that the matter did not go through the Senate. That was a very, very significant objection because it is a matter affecting counties. Now it is with the Senate. I want to guarantee and assure the nation that we are going to make the right decision, the decision that accords with the needs of the people and a decision that aligns with the Constitution.
Okay. Yes, let's sample the feedback, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an hour now talking about this very subject matter. Sir Nixon Ndugure says fighting corrupt in Kenya, corruption is the It's a real tall order, very difficult because the corrupt gurus are faceless. The briber and the bribee are just but very tormenting ghosts who are not scared by the many threats hurled at them. Engineer Lazaro says why corruption allegations rattle parliamentarians and a good number of them fights various graft cases in courts. There is misconception somewhere. Parliaments fighting back instead of redeeming themselves. Orut Wasam says it's at times hard to give corruption the fight it needs in our country, where every leader has no clear name from corruption, where citizens accept corruption as normal. Then in every aspect we are lying to ourselves as a country to end it. Mark_Makunda says Parliament has been a rubber stamp of the executive, the same executive that's complaining goes to bed with the National Assembly and thinks its infidelity will go unnoticed. It's time to style up. John Musunga says when the president said he wants to fight corruption, he should mean it by naming those MPs and senators who are corrupt. He should not spare them at all. We want them arrested. The final comments, Senior Counsel, briefly.
Thank you very much. I think we started with the Katiba. The infrastructure is there, the institutions are there. If you ask me, the main issue Kenyans can undertake has to do with our political culture. One of the things the Senator said was, who do you elect? It's a good question. If you elect X because X comes from your ethnic community, or because the political party leader has said you should elect X, you should not expect X to do governance issues, to do all the great things, so long as the person is from your ethnic community or he or she has been elected on the instructions of a political party leader. So I think the most important thing as we head towards 2027 is who do we give these very powerful offices? I think we as a nation owe it to ourselves to elect people based on the right things, not on the wrong things. And then choices have consequences. If you elect people on the wrong premises, well, it comes with the territory then. Thank you.
Yes, Sheila.
Thank you. I think as we prepare for the commemoration of the 15th year of this Katiba, and given the discussion we're having on the role of some of the critical independent, in fact, for me, the foremost independent institution under the Constitution, that is Parliament. What I'm taking home is on the key elements of the Constitution, the separation of powers, the independence of institutions, and the element around the checks and balances, and how our institutions led by Parliament have failed, including some of our independent commissions. We really need to rethink the people that we put in public office, starting from Parliament, because they're the ones who vet then people who even go to these commissions. Because the fits and misstarts in regard to the implementation of the Constitution can be taken back to the quality of leadership that we have, and starting from Parliament. You know, it is akin to what we say, putting new wine in old wineskin. So we had this new Constitution, but then we still had the same infrastructure in terms of systems, and then the people and the culture did not change. And that is why we are having so much difficulty in implementing this new Constitution. And for that to happen, we must really rethink the people that we are voting to Parliament and to all these other elective offices, who will then put in place people who are in independent commissions and other critical offices. Because what we are lacking right now is even people who have the courage, you know, to say no to executive encroachment. And that's what we need, so that we're able to see change in terms of how our critical institutions conduct themselves and protect the public interest.
Thank you. Yes, Senator.
Katiba at 15, there's a chapter that we don't seem to be giving prominence, and that is a chapter on leadership and integrity. And now that the President has proclaimed National Day, I pray that this first year, our focus goes to that chapter on leadership and integrity. It is not a suggestion, the things that have been put in that chapter. That is a law of the land. But every day you see us take action, political action, civil action, civic action, that is directly contrary to that chapter. This country, we have decided to normalize the abnormal. It is normal for Mheshimiwa Abdikadir, when he's walking around, to be asked for a handout. It is very normal. Yeye ni mheshimiwa, inafaa atoe. Atatoa wapi? It is normal for politicians to fly around in choppers, doing empowerment rallies. It is very normal. But we don't ask ourselves, where is that money coming from? That could be the money that is being pinched from your payslip. So Katiba at 15, for me, the focus should be on Chapter 6, on leadership and integrity. I also do agree that Parliament has got a long way to go.
Okay.
Of course, it starts with the caliber and the cadre that goes to Parliament. But I think that in one area that perhaps you have failed, and I would make that admission, is that Parliament has also become lazy in legislation. Look at the 4 health laws that we passed. I remember the Senate passed those laws while we were sitting in Turkana. But Parliament has gone into this habit of passing skeleton legislation and leaving the executive, giving the executive room to fill in the blanks through regulation. And that is why we are having so many problems around, be it health, be it housing, and several other government initiatives. So yes, as a member of Parliament, I definitely must pull up my socks to ensure that when legislation comes before the House, it is not skeleton that is left to the executive to fill. With regards to corruption, we are not in competition with the president, and we cannot look Kenyans straight in the eye and say that there is no corruption in Parliament. This is a national disease, but we can only fight it if we are systematic. We can only fight it if we have respect for institutions. And really, Ayub, you can have a constitution, and this perhaps the senior counsel would tell us, you can have a constitution, but if you do not have institutions defined in political theory as norms, values, cultures, it will be a piece of paper.
Thank you.
So we must also build strong institutions that go beyond the organizations.
Thank you so much. Even worse when there's a constitution and no constitutionalism. Thank you. Senator Moses Kajwang, many thanks for your time. Sheila Masinde, thanks for your time. Senior Counsel, much appreciated for your presence. And it's a happy 15th anniversary for one of the most transformative constitutions that Kenya has ever granted itself. Thank you for watching the Monday Report, and we'll see you here on Citizen Television, by the grace of God, on Wednesday. Many thanks for your company, and good night.